Our guest today is Mick Waters. He's spent all his working life in education, as a teacher, then a head teacher. He was Chief Advisor for Birmingham Local Authority and then Chief Education Officer in Manchester. He's now Director of Curriculum at the Qualifications and Curriculum Authority. Mick, welcome.
Thank you.
Interestingly, you've worked in both Birmingham and Manchester at a time of great change for those cities. And I think it's fair to say that probably both those cities put education, if not at the centre of that regeneration, they acknowledged that it played a huge part. What was that experience like, being in big Victorian cities at that time of regeneration and having a key part to play in education?
Well, Birmingham and Manchester are amazing cities, and to be there as they picked themselves up from the doldrums of post-war difficulties was absolutely brilliant. But I think some of the work that's taken place in the last 10 years, where there's a recognition that we've all got to gather around youngsters and fit them for the future. I think that's been the best period, really.
Yeah, and that links us quite nicely to the national curriculum, I suppose, because the national curriculum has been one of those things that I suppose you could say has cemented the education system together. Is it important in cementing the nation together? Is the national curriculum that big a thing?
I think the phrase is lovely, cementing the nation together, because I would like to think that the curriculum was something that we treasured it as a nation, and we saw as really precious for children, so that we could all look at children in our country and say, isn't it wonderful what we've done for them in their early years, and that we'd have a pride in what we were offering. Now, since the national curriculum was invented in the late 80s, right, there's been this endless squabbling by the adults. And so if you're a child, particularly a teenager, you must listen to some of this and wonder, well, can't they agree on what I should learn about? And can't they be proud of it? And shouldn't we all sort of fight together to make it something really precious? I often think that if the national curriculum was a child, it would be, struggling a bit.
Taken into care, you looked after the child.
Yeah, employers think it doesn't work, parents can't understand it, teachers think it's too big for itself. I think it's a challenge. I think the challenge is to try and encourage those people that are interested, which is pretty well everybody, to recognise that we've got to get down to, first of all, what's really important, what's the purpose of the curriculum.
Do you think, just stop at that, because that's interesting, do you think, if we look at that, what the purpose of a curriculum should be, do you think, as a nation, we'd more or less get unanimity on that?
Well,
does the difference of opinion start when you're talking about how to package it?
We've done some work over the last 18 months asking a wide range of people what they think the aims should be for learning in our schools. And we've asked thousands of people and got millions of words in response. And it all boils down to three key aims that, I know this is just labels, and behind that are thousands of words, but people want young people to be confident as individuals, successful as learners, and responsible as citizens. And that's key within the curriculum reform we're trying to develop at secondary stage.
Okay. Just before we move on to look at the present changes that are being proposed by QCA, do you think the curriculum has changed a lot since the introduction of the national curriculum in the 80s? Or has it been fiddling? Fiddling at the edges or fundamental change?
I think that when the curriculum was developed in the late 80s, it was a good move. I think there'd been a lot of haphazard curriculum work, some brilliant work and some very, very poor work, as history shows. What the national curriculum did was make sure there was an entitlement for children, whether they lived in Berwick or Bodmin, Birmingham or Billericay, they got an entitlement. Whether that meant that overall the teaching for young people got better, and whether the learning therefore improved, is open to doubt, and there's lots of debate about that from academics. And if you think about the late 80s, if you looked at pictures of the late 80s, life in that time, and compared it to now, you would see massive change. And we have to say what in the curriculum needs to change to take account of that. In 1988, the internet hadn't been invented.
It's amazing, isn't it?
The internet began in 1991, it's 15, it's in year 10. Right? And we've got to take account of that in a really positive way in the work we do with schools. Not be frightened of it. We're not frightened of books. They've been around for a long while. You know, children have access to books, and we think it's a wonderful thing. They also have access to knowledge and information through the internet that we should be able to capitalise on and make sense of. Since 1988, the number of people coming into this country from different places across the world has brought a rich diversity in our population that wasn't there at that time. There was diversity, but not the breadth of diversity that we see now. And we've got to just make the curriculum fit the needs of the future for our young people, while still recognising that they are children and teenagers growing up and they need an enjoyable time in school and elsewhere.
That's true. Interestingly, one of the things, the impressions I got when I was looking at the curriculum reforms of this year for Key Stage 3 is that I felt for the first time that the emphasis was about structure of the curriculum more so than content. So you didn't launch a review of the schemes or anything like that. It was almost as though you'd said, look, we don't want to keep giving upheaval on the content, but we do think it could be structured in a slightly different way.
The initial request from government was to look at the programmes of study and try to slim down the content. And what we've tried to do is take out what I call low-level clutter.
Right.
This obsession with small detail and asking teachers to make sure that every child in the country knows a certain fact or a certain piece of information. But the programmes of study are only the ingredients. They're the ingredients of the meal. And the real challenge, I believe, is in the design of the curriculum so that it matters in individual schools to the children that are being taught. And I think it's the design that's as important as the ingredients.
I think that's what makes this particular curriculum review different than previous ones, and it'd be interesting to see how it goes. There's also an element that when I read through sort of the examples that were being given, there's a bit of me that said, well, hang on, this isn't new, this isn't a brand new idea. There are schools who do this. I mean, I suppose if I was being hypercritical, I think I might ask you, come on, is this a rebrand? I mean, you're getting rid of low-level clutter isn't very radical. It's not a big change. Some of these things are happening already. How big an idea is it? Is it a good rebrand of what's existing? And there's nothing wrong in that to focus attention. Or is it really fundamental change that you're asking of schools?
It's a bit of all of those things. First of all, it's not a massive change. What we've done is taken out a lot of the clutter and given teachers and schools the opportunity to structure a curriculum that matters to them. In the end, it's down to, well, what can we do to make this curriculum come alive for children and be such a magnet they can't pull away from it? And there are many schools in this country that are doing absolutely amazing curriculum work, and what we've tried to do is identify those schools, work with them to identify what it is that's making their curriculum work and why it is that their curriculum has caught fire. One
of the ways in the curriculum review you've talked about rebuilding the structure of the curriculum is a greater emphasis on cross-curricular work or interdisciplinary work, but that's not entirely new either. I mean, we've done that before as well, possibly when you and I started teaching, and it got the impression then of being a bit wishy-washy, of missing things out, of being a bit lax, of lacking rigour. So why is it different now? When you talk about cross-curricular work now, why was it different than it was in the 70s?
Yeah. I think what we're finding in the schools that are carrying out the pilot work for us is that the main difference is the level of rigour in what the children are doing and the way the application of one subject with another. And it's creating these contexts for learning, which is so absolutely vital. Employers tell us that they want to see soft skills develop, they want to see teamwork, they want to see children who can use ideas in a creative way, that are adaptable, flexible, support each other. Now, if we're going to deliver those things for employers, as well as the functional skills, we've got to give children real context in which to learn. So we've tried to say that within the context of the curriculum, the youngsters should be engaged in an activity within their own community, where they could restore an area of recreational land, or they could build a bird hide, or they could do something which was gathering a survey for a local political issue, that they actually get involved in it in a way that has relevance to the community. Another aspect is where we're suggesting, and we're seeing in our pilot schools, teachers from subject disciplines helping each other to make relevance to youngsters, and how do they fit together. Now, it's not about saying there's got to be projects and themes where we all gather around and do word association and think whether we can think of yet another thing that sounds vaguely linked. But it is about saying, what can we fit together in the way in which the programmes of study are offered to the youngsters to make them realise that there is a link between the learning that they do in different areas.
Does it change the status of the subject in school, do you think? I suppose in the 90s there was a bit of a pressure to build up the importance of subjects like the literacy hour, the numeracy hour, and nothing else you should be taught during that hour almost. Is this a shift away from the power of subject knowledge?
No, I think subject knowledge is absolutely basic. Without knowledge, you can't develop skills. You need knowledge to have skills. So it's not skills or knowledge, it's both. Subjects are important. I think the challenge is to balance the need for sort of focus on the content of the subject in terms to the power towards the power of the subject discipline. And I think we've got to get over to youngsters the real enjoyment of being a scientist, or what is it in the thinking of a historian that makes them different from the way in which geographers might think, or the way in which an artist might think. And we've got to do some work which is about helping children to learn what a specialism is and how you develop a specialism. A specialism isn't what you're left with when you've failed everything else. And too many children think that's what it is.
That's what you've described is quite complicated for teachers, isn't it? I mean, ironically, and I think there's a big issue here, it's what primary schools do all the time, but we make this decision that by secondary we go into specialist teaching. And I'm just thinking, as we've been talking, about the science teacher or the English teacher who's not only got all the pressures they've got as teachers, but have now got to work more closely together. It's not going to be easy for them, is it?
No. What we're finding in the pilot schools, case study schools, is that where they're looking at working together from different disciplines, there's a real enthusiasm and a real excitement about what's possible. And many, many teachers are really enthusiastic about this chance.
So it's given them an extra breath of life, really.
You know, a bit of a boost, really. Yeah. Because the way we go around in schools is very interesting. Do you have to go Velcro together because you're all mathematicians? And
the maths corner.
Yeah, and do the PE lot have to walk around sort of holding hands all the time because they are the PE lot? Department is a fascinating term. It means you depart from the central core, and we ought to be coming together over learning. But really exploiting what's possible.
Another thing I think might be feared by parents sometimes is you're not talking about, are you, that PE teachers can teach maths or English teachers can teach history. I mean, it's not a way of getting around the fact we've not got enough maths teachers or physics teachers or
certainly not.
Anything like that.
No, it's certainly not that. But nevertheless, the case that what we don't want teachers saying is, I can't help you with maths because I'm a PE teacher. We want teachers helping children in every subject all the time, and sometimes saying, I don't know about that, but let's all go ask the maths teacher or the art teacher or the science teacher what it is that we can take forward. I just think there's a lot to do on getting our children to look beyond the key stage they're in and leapfrog a few key stages. So many young children, some of those from the, shall we say, the more deprived backgrounds that we were talking about earlier, many children don't know what you can study at university. They think you have to carry on doing those subjects of the national curriculum at university because they don't know about others. And somewhere in Key Stage 3, we should be taking that opportunity to say, you've had that lovely primary experience, and all this lays in front of you, the world of work, the world of further and higher education. And these are some of the things that people do in that world. So if you want to go towards those things, here are the ways in which
it's the final stage before they make choices at 14, isn't it?
That's right. And sometimes the choices are built on very, very shaky ground because the children haven't had that width of experience to know what the choice is about.
I mean, you described it as getting rid of the clutter. That's one thing. But the minute you've got this flexibility and you're saying to teachers, you know, make decisions themselves, you've got two risks, I suppose. One is that children miss out again. And, you know, the old story of the good at English, they can do English all day. Or second, at the very least, it's difficult to monitor what each child has done. I mean, the present structure of 40 minutes of this, 40 minutes of that might have many weaknesses, and it has. But at least you know which subjects each child has covered. And I know they may not have done it effectively. Is that a worry that you might be moving along the road of freedom and you might clash in and take away entitlement?
Yeah, the present structure of 40 minutes followed by 40 minutes by 40 minutes at least tells you what you've delivered. What it doesn't tell you is whether they've got it.
Yes.
And I think we've got to take a step that says, what is the best way to put this together? So going back to my sort of analogy of the ingredients, if you imagine you've come back from the market with all the ingredients from a lovely salad, and you've got some tomatoes and some cucumber, some lettuce, some onions, some sweet corn, some mushrooms and so on. What we currently do is we say we'll have 40 minutes of tomatoes, then a bell will ring, and you get 40 minutes of cucumber. Then after a 15-minute break, you settle down to double onions. Yeah. And I'm not sure that's the best way to enjoy a salad. Now, some parts of it are right on their own. Sometimes you just crunch on the tomato and it's good.
And that will still be the case. Sometimes there's a need to teach a subject separately.
Absolutely. And many times there's a need to teach a subject separately. The challenge is the rigour with which we teach it, so children dig deep and they really understand that period of history, or they really understand the learning about that location in history. But in the curriculum that we've proposed, every subject starts with what are the big ideas in this subject? What are the important things that children need to learn during Key Stage 3? And I think that's more important than did they know this fact, did they know that date, can they recall it?
Do you sometimes feel like poacher turned gamekeeper? Because I reckon if you said to teachers, what is it that stopped you innovating in the curriculum? Why haven't you taken these risks? QCA would be one of the organisations which they cited as saying, well, I couldn't because of the curriculum. So to an extent, it's quite a clever in the nicest sense of the word, it's quite a clever and a difficult trick you're trying to pull off, that QCA is going to be the great liberator now rather than the great restrictor of innovation.
Oh, well, I think that's a good point.
Is that how you're positioning yourself?
Yeah, I mean, QCA is a fascinating organisation, and the word authority on the end of it is an interesting one to explore. If you're an authority, you can get your authority by telling people what they have to do, or you can get your authority by building credibility, building in people a trust about what you're trying to develop, and being the conjurer of innovation. And I think our challenge is to get people to believe sufficiently in the curriculum that they can make it work for their youngsters. I do believe that over the years we've stopped talking about the curriculum, where we've talked all the time about the national curriculum. I mean, I'm director of curriculum. It is the curriculum authority for the nation. We are not the national curriculum authority. We are the curriculum authority for the nation. And over years, QCA has been drawn into conversation endlessly about the national curriculum and not the bigger curriculum.
I was going to ask you that, but how much were you bearing in mind the move potentially to keep all 16 to 19-year-olds in education and training? Because I can't make up my mind whether that's a big change or not, to tell you the truth, because it's not keeping them in school, but it's part of what you're doing with the younger years of secondary. Do you have in mind the fact that within a few years we could have everybody under the age of 18 in educational training?
Yes, and I think that's the point I was making earlier about throughout the school system we have to give youngsters a picture of pathways that are available to them to take them into work, into further education, into training, into higher education. And that can start way back in nursery. I've got some brilliant examples of people working in nurseries talking about the world of work for children.
Sure.
And it's that picture of pathways that are available rather than which pathway is the best for you yet. Let's keep talking about possibilities and where we might go.
I wanted to talk a bit about qualifications because I think there's still I suppose we've got into the habit of national tests and results day and the rest of it, because I still think there's a bit of lack of clarity about what the proposals are here. The minute you start giving people freedom to do things, it means that assessment has to have that flexibility as well. Now, alongside your work, we've got the proposals from the government that somehow will loosen up on the key stage tests. The changes you're making, what changes will need to happen in assessment?
In the secondary review?
In the secondary review, in order for your curriculum to really get hold of schools.
I mean, if you look at some of the ways we test children, they're not exactly modern in the sense that they're part of our tradition and there are other options available. And I think what the government are doing is thinking about the other options, and the progress testing development is a step towards seeing whether we can be more effective in our assessment, but at the same time maintain the confidence of parents and community.
I mean, Ken Boston, the Chief Executive of the QCA, suggested you do that by testing a sample of children at those key stages rather than every single child, sort of to give you that national picture.
Well, one of the challenges in assessment is that we're using the end of key stage test for lots of purposes.
That's right.
And what Ken's talking about is the purpose, which is to measure standards over time, could be met on a sampling basis. That doesn't meet the challenge of helping teachers to provide the right instruction, the right techniques for their children tomorrow as a result of the assessment that's done today.
Do you have to make the teachers less nervous about the assessment and all that accountability framework?
Well, what we know is that it's not the assessment, it's the accountability framework
what
and
putting
what
things in the
happens
public
afterwards.
domain and the league tables.
Now, my experience in Manchester and Birmingham was that the worry about weak results led to a narrowing of the curriculum. And we had to basically, in both places, talk about, is that what we want for our children? And we decided we were going to give, in both those places, children a rich experience, an experience that mattered, and we were going to make learning real. And when we did that, the basic results went up anyway. So if you look at the profile of achievement, of attainment in those two cities, they rose dramatically, while the curriculum was made broad and rich and interesting for young people. So it's not one or the other. But many schools think it is. I do understand the worry. I really understand it.
But some have the confidence to go beyond that and take the risks. It's about giving the rest that confidence.
I'm not sure it's a risk, though. I think the risk is...
I think I agree with you. They feel it's a risk.
Yeah, it's the interval between doing this and showing that it's working is the worry, because if something dreadful happens in that period, we're all accountable. It's the accountability framework that is actually at the heart of some of the worries. So, you know, when a child gets to 13 and does its Key Stage 3 SATs, Key Stage 3 assessments, it has only previously been tested nationally once.
That's exactly right.
Right,
yeah.
so it's not exactly overburdened with testing, but it's what happens to the testing that worries teachers.
I have to say, some of the words you're using in this new curriculum flummox me. I mean, curriculum lenses, curriculum dimensions. I mean, what's the point of using phrases like that are just something else to learn? And, you know, I should think parents have just about got used to Key Stage 1, 2, 3 and 4, and now you're plonking this other language. And I think my question really is, you know, the curriculum is one of those areas of education that gets laden down with specialist language, and you've done a little bit more of it. Are you aware of that, or is it language for the profession only?
Oh, the jargon.
The jargon. Yeah.
Well, every profession has its jargon, doesn't it? And we have to live with that. I think there's the balance to be played between using jargon and trying to make things accessible. The word lenses came about because we were trying to say there's more than one way of looking at the curriculum.
I see.
And how should we look at it? We can look through different lenses.
Right.
And you might look for, in designing your curriculum, you may start from the subjects and say, let's design with a subject basis. But you could use the lens of the Every Child Matters agenda.
Yes.
So if you're a school that needs to focus really heavily on children's health prospects because they really matter, maybe if you looked at the curriculum through the lens of health, you would see some ways forward that hadn't been appropriate before. So our efforts on the lenses was just simply a way of saying, here's a different way of looking at the curriculum.
So it's a tool for teachers more than new terminology in curriculum?
It's not new terminology, it's just a way of helping people through the design process. And we are trying to produce the curriculum as a web-based, on a web-based format, so that anybody logging on can find their way through the design process by using these lenses as starting points. So I doubt many people in the world beyond schooling would want to do that. They're very welcome to. It'll be a public website. Okay. New words come along all the time.
Well, I've learned it in preparing for this interview, so there you are. It's become part of my language as well. Right, just take things broad. I mean, I suppose when you started off as a young teacher, you dreamt for a minute you'd end up, you know, being director of the curriculum for the nation rather than the national, rather than national curriculum, director of curriculum for the nation. And you've not just been an administrator, you have been a classroom teacher. Looking back and looking forward, how important is the curriculum? What's the power of the curriculum? It's your everyday job now, and there's a danger when that happens that you give it in your own mind more importance than it's got. Where do you slot it in? Not in terms of hierarchy, but what's it special in? What does it offer that nothing else can? And how important is it?
So if you say where's the curriculum fit, I think it's very near the front of what matters. Those schools that think hard about the curriculum achieve more for children. absolutely sure about that. In front of it, I would probably put the quality of teaching, because I can offer you the ingredients, but unless you can sort them out, well, what can we do? And then there are all those other things, that ability to relate to parents and community, that ability to make children think they can do this, that ability to make children think learning's worth it, mean that the quality of teaching is also about the quality of relationships, that ability to make people wonder and make people think and make people question. And when you see adults who are really learning still and want to know more, then you've got an image to show children about what it can offer and what it can open for them. So I think the curriculum really matters. It's about the only job I would have done nationally.
But it's not standalone, it can't survive without the other things
curriculum
around
on
it.
its own won't get anywhere, will it? It'll just rot. You've got to bring it to life and you've got to do things.
Success somehow is getting all those things in the same place at the same time.
So I think my job as at QCA and QCA's job is to create professional contagion around the curriculum, create a sort of national enthusiasm for this thing, so that we do, as we said at the beginning, so that we do look back as a country at what we've done for our youngsters and say that was worth it, and aren't we proud of it, and shouldn't we delight in the way our youngsters are developing?
Mick Waters, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.